Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing an interesting notion of why the government might really be so dead set against working from home. Sneak preview, not necessarily the reasons that they're saying. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, for people whose role is entirely computer-based, clerical, where all they need is the computer, suitable office space to use it, internet connection, there's really no reason why working from home shouldn't be the model going forward. It's better for the company. They save on electricity and heating. They need to rent less office space themselves. You know, they may want these workers to come in once a week or once a fortnight or something, but generally speaking, there's no need for more than that. Critics, including Boris Johnson, have tried to say that people get distracted at home and won't do as much work. Interestingly, he talked about them eating cheese and drinking wine. I wonder who he could be thinking of. You know, but it's a nonsense for two reasons, of course. First, there are more distractions in an office of chatterboxers. I know my partner gets less done on the 2 days she goes into the office each week because people will be swinging by the office and talking. And a 5-minute talk about work turns into a 25-minute talk about something completely different. Second, if you don't do your work at home, why wouldn't it be the same as consequences as not doing the work in the office? Like people are trying to say, oh, managers don't know what they're doing at home. It's like, what? How do they know what they're doing in the office then? They're not even in the same office a lot of the time. As if managers are stood over the shoulders of people in offices. Well, absolutely right. Has any of these people ever worked in an office? If the role is entirely computer-based, you don't have managers looking over your shoulder. They set the tasks. They can obviously see whether you've done them or not without needing to physically sit at the computer and check. Wherever the work has gone, has it gone into a shared area? They check the shared area. They ask you to email a document to them if that's what it was. You know, even when you're working in an office, the checking of productivity is done via the computer anyway. At the end of the day, if your manager cannot see if the tasks they've assigned have been done, they're not only a very poor manager, but how would they tell in the office? Are we seriously trying to say that managers judge productivity by how quickly you wear out the keyboard? So no, the objections are nonsense. All the more bizarre as the loudest critics are those who work at home themselves. Newspaper columnists. Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson is the most famous example in the country of someone who works at home. But working from home represents a huge cost saving for companies. Even before the pandemic, I used to despair at organisations who paid for travel, accommodation, subsistence for workers to go across the country for a meeting that required no physical interactions at all. Sure enough, sometimes you go there and you need that. But a lot of the time, the meetings could have been done using remote conferencing. In fact, it would have been better done using remote conferencing at no extra cost. You know, obviously there are a lot of jobs that can't be done remotely, or at least not well. A bus driver can't do the job remotely. I mean, I guess we could install the technology to allow them to remotely control the bus from their own living room, but I'm not sure that would give people confidence. You know, as a former teacher, I wouldn't have wanted a long-term remote teaching culture. I had to do some teaching remotely during the lockdowns. It's nowhere near as effective as being in the classroom. Terrible. But for the jobs where you can work as productively or more so from home, why not? And that's the question, really, genuinely. Why not? The easy answer is the government are in the thrall of the property owners and they don't like the idea of losing out on office rents. Of course, the government could just grow the economy like they keep talking about. After all, what does it matter if an individual business needs less office space if we can just have more businesses? But of course, the economy is stagnant. The complaints of office landlords is real. Dominic Cummings recently said that Boris Johnson, right from April 2020, had been getting repeated calls from newspaper owners that working from home was costing them a fortune. The media barons are basically on Johnson's back to stop this culture before it even begins. Another reason to look at the rules on news media ownership in this country. And all this makes a lot of sense. Powerful business interests who lose out, those who rent office space, those who provide food and drink for lunches. We all heard about the anguish of sandwich shop owners. Will no one think of the sandwiches during lockdown because people were basically making their own sandwiches at home? But there's another reason why the Conservatives might want to stop working from home. Without the need for pressure from corporate interests, strategically, working from home is bad for the Tories. Now, it's a concept I'd not considered before. Right now, if you look at the political landscape, the Conservatives do well in rural areas and they've recently made gains in the old knackered industrial towns. Labour do well in the cities. Now, this has actually been a driving force behind Labour's recent polling failures at general elections. Yes, there's other issues as well, but there's been a significant demographic shift. Young people from some of these old industrial towns go to university because there's an increasing number of young people go to university now. They then get a job in the city. Not much in the way of decent jobs in their old hometown because of the industrial decline, ironically, under the Tories. So the population of these towns loses the sort of people who would vote Labour and is therefore skewed more towards the elderly and homeowners who are more likely to vote Conservative. And so the Conservatives suddenly find that with the right strategy, they can take towns that used to be strictly off limits. The educated people who left those towns go to the cities where Labour were already strong anyway. But living in a city is a pain. Nice facilities, sure, but expensive and, if you're like me, stressfully busy. But that's where the jobs are. But what if it weren't? Or more specifically, what if the jobs were still there, but you only had to go into the office once a week or something? It means you could work from home 4 days a week, then travel in on one day. Well, if that's the arrangement, you might be willing to travel much further for that one day. You could stay in your old industrial town and still get a job in the city. It's cheaper, living costs are less on balance, and it means that these Labour demographics aren't clustered together in the places where Labour were already strong anyway. Nightmare for the Conservatives, even under first past the post, because it would start to reverse the demographic changes that have seen them make gains in parts of the country previously considered impossible to capture. And it is, as I say, it's a concept I'd not considered myself, but it is compelling. Of course, the main drive behind the government's opposition to working from home may actually just be that simple explanation of pressure from media barons and interested Tory donors who own office space. But Tory strategists may also fear the long-term implications of both businesses and workers coming to the realisation that they both win with an intelligent approach to flexible working arrangements. So many advantages to each for certain types of jobs. I mean, for example, when we just talk about when they say that the jobs would still potentially be in the city, but you could work outside. They wouldn't necessarily. You could have a business that goes, well, we need less office space. We could have a small office here and a small office over here as well, between two large populations. And then that means you've got a much wider radius of a pool of workers. Again, if they only had to travel in 1 day a week. Absolute boon for businesses and workers. And you consider this. You consider that largely as a result of the Conservatives since the days of Thatcher, the UK has been pushed to become a heavily service-driven economy. The reality is there are a lot of these computer-based jobs that require little to no physical interactions with anything or anyone. And because there are a lot of these jobs, the stakes could be quite high. If working from home for these roles develops into the normal working culture, as I say, with like potentially once a week or once a fortnight physically going into the office for something, could actually change the distribution of the population. Maybe not to the same extent as the Industrial Revolution changed it, but it could have a massive impact. Working from home is opposed by the Conservatives. Not necessarily because it's bad for the economy, in fact, not at all because it's bad for the economy. It's not bad for businesses and it's not bad for workers, but because it's bad for them and bad for the tiny fraction of 1% of the people who influence them. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button, maybe even click on the join button if you'd be interested in memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.